Joined this morning by Logan Naidu, who's the founder of Dartmouth Partners and the CEO of the Kernel Group.
We said, we'll get to 100 million, and I remember thinking, that is so big. So I said, we'll do that in 10 years. Well, we've got 10 years to do it. We did it in 4.
Experience the growth that you've had in such a short space of time is incredible.
The catalyst has been the group suddenly having more experienced people inputting into the business and helping us think bigger.
Joined this morning by Logan Naidu, who's the founder of Dartmouth Partners and the CEO of the Kernel Group. Businesses set up in 2012 and enjoyed incredible success since then. 30% year-on-year growth, 250 staff now. And over the past few years, Logan's become a great friend. Morning, how are you doing?
I'm well. Great to be here.
So start us off. Tell me about yourself and a little bit about how you became an entrepreneur and ended up running a recruitment business.
That could take up the full hour, couldn't it? So, look, I think what's important to know, for me, important to know, look, son of immigrants, both parents from different parts in the country. One was an economic migrant, one was actually a legal immigrant, ran away from home. And so the DNA of the family was hard work and some aspiration in terms of probably lots of pressure for the next generation, i.e. me and my sister. I think the expectation was to probably go into professional services and probably be a lawyer or a doctor, which you might understand. And I ended up working in an investment bank for 3 years, which actually pleased no one because it wasn't really a recognised profession. And I remember trying to tell my dad that actually it's a pretty good job. And like, no one knows what that is. Did 3 years there. I think it's probably fair to say was not super committed to it. Couldn't handle lack of sleep particularly well. And it was probably quite difficult to manage. Nowadays, we'd say that's entrepreneurial itch. I think probably looking back on it was quite a large part of immaturity as well. Okay. And then fell into setting up my first business in 2005. So I was 26, we started that. Grew that to about 30, 35 people. It was a nice business. We had 3 partners. And I sort of fell out of love with that business for various reasons. And then started Dartmouth and now what's Kernel in 2012. Mm-hmm.
And talk to me a bit through the journey, because it's a fascinating story, and I think so many people in our industry aspire to scaling a business. Many struggle to get past a certain point, but to experience the growth that you've had in such a short space of time is incredible. I mean, how did you do it, and what were the challenges? Main challenges.
Look, I think if you look at our industry, and I guess mostly professional services businesses as a whole, they're people-based businesses, right? So in theory, they're highly scalable and actually relatively simple businesses mechanically, right? You're not holding inventory, you're not building factories or machines. How hard could it be to hire people, train them up, deploy them, right? It sounds simple in practice, but people are obviously complicated. And I think that what you've got within consulting as a whole is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of micro businesses which are set up by really good practitioners who have fallen out of a big firm, whether that's an Accenture or PwC or in our world a Michael Page or Korn Ferry or whatever, who think, look, I can build take my practice and set up a business, and the skill set that you're taking generally is one of a practitioner, right? And so that's one of the the great things about the industry. You can have lots of small businesses existing. The skill sets then take that on and develop it and grow it is actually completely different, right? And that's one that is very different to what makes people good practitioners. And I don't think there's any different to that. So, what makes a great practitioner? Drive, hunger, I guess relentless focus on typically the client, and the willingness to chase. Typically what then transitions into being a great, let's start with manager and then leader, are probably all the opposite things. So patience, lack of emotion, the willingness to take a step back, financially, the willingness to reinvest in the business and stop treating it as, in all honesty, probably a personal piggy bank. In terms of, that's my business, that's my cash, that mindset's got to change as you professionalize the business. And then all the things that infrastructure stuff, which to most entrepreneurs is quite boring. So L&D, professionalizing finance, marketing, all that infrastructure and governance piece that goes around helping to scale a business, and taking away from that mindset of, look, we're all just, practitioners or billers. Why can't we just all do that? That's the hardest bit. And look, we were no different, right? So if we take my first business, we had broadly 30 people running around making money. Obviously, there's some varying levels of success within that, but we looked at that as a cash business every year. What dividend could it pay out? I had two partners that are 15 years older than me, and so the mindset was slightly different in terms of cash required for lifestyles. And then when we started Dartmouth, we had a couple really key principles, which is, one, we've got to have 30% margin year on year in terms of net margin after tax. Two, we'll reinvest at least half back into the business every year to keep driving top and bottom line growth. I guess three, we were very driven, or I was very driven to say, look, the equity's got to be worth something to everyone, and that's where the value is. So whilst these businesses do pay cash comp quite a lot to the individuals within it, where the real action is the equity, is being driven to getting the first deal done as a sign of external validation that we're doing something right, was quite key. And then within that story, we went through two phases. So we started, actually not far from here, was the London Olympic opening ceremony, wasn't it? So we started the week of the London Olympic opening ceremony, which, if you remember, was the worst time to start a business, because everyone was being told, don't go to work. Yeah. Before, work from home was a thing, but everyone said, don't go to Canary Wharf, like the tubes are going to be packed. And so I remember we started this business, and like hardly anyone was around for the first 2 weeks, so who do we call? But we grew really, really quickly, and I made all the mistakes, right? Kind of probably, we say we hired the wrong people. We didn't hire the wrong people. We actually, in some ways, just sold the job incorrectly. Yeah. We were saying, we want to hire people who are sort of bright research type people, and actually what we didn't have was a sales engine within the business. I had a lot of really good, hard-working, well-educated researchers in the business, and we grew that off the back of 2 or 3 key salespeople who could feed the rest of the business. Got to about 25, 30 people and just plateaued. Yes. And that got, we went from 2012 to 2016 like that. And one of the biggest mistakes we made was probably hiring the wrong people into a job that shouldn't have existed. Yes. And we had to, rebuild that. We probably, in 2016, we say crashed the business, went from 30 down to 15 in the course of the first 6 months, and rehired another 15, but with the idea that, look, this is a sales job. And that then kicked the business on going forwards. That was one of our biggest mistakes. And the second probably biggest one, which, we all talk about culture and values. It's increasingly, I'd say on message nowadays. But the reality is that, implementing that culture and values, generally, if you're going to look at it, it's going to cost you money, because, again, within our industry in particular, but I think all consulting businesses, you've got egos to manage. And we did the ego management piece pretty badly in the first 4 years. And that cost us. We had to unpick that, exit, or part company with someone that was a really good practitioner, but probably just culturally not aligned with us. And that honestly, that was very painful. That all happened in 2016. Again, that was a pretty painful experience at the time.
And just thinking about management, and I remember one of the first times I met you, one of the things I left at the meeting, or you left me with at the meeting, was the difference between your business, James, and the ability to scale is to do with systems and processes. But clearly it's very different, as you say, managing a team of 20 to a business of 300. What changes have you had to make in terms of your management style? And going back to that point on systems and processes, what have you implemented to transition from Logan the practitioner to Logan the business manager?
Look, I guess personally, personal growth. Obviously, I'm 10 years older, and there is a maturity element there, isn't there? In terms of we started the business. The advice I got from my father-in-law, he always just said this: is look, he said particularly men don't come into their prime until their 40s to 50s. I remember thinking, well, I think I'm in my prime right now. And actually, look, I think you've got all the energy in the world and probably not a great understanding of how to direct it. And so I used to run around, doing whack-a-mole really, really hard every day, thinking I'm getting loads of stuff done. And a lot of that energy was just misguided and misdirected. I think I still run around and probably still do that because it's in my nature, but just knowing which levers to pull on to get more leverage for the business is one of the big changes that I think you as a manager make. Secondly, for me, I just calm down a lot. So I'm still relatively intense, but the intensity that I bring to the business of the floor has changed a little bit. Which will probably surprise some of the people that work with me today, but it was far more intense in the early days.
What kind of behaviours does that look like?
I was just like impatient, a bit grumpy, obvious displeasure at things that weren't done in the way that I'd want them done. It's not necessarily even to the standard I'd want them done, but just that's just not done. Sloppy behaviour would still bothers me, but really bother me. And I think people would just feel that your displeasure or my displeasure every day. And no one comes to work to feel bad, right? And we were probably sending on a monthly basis half our floor home who are just feeling like this is just hard work. And so I was really bad at celebrating success because it was never good enough. It's like, look, we want to be here and we're here, so we've got 10 years to get there, and we'll celebrate when we get there. And actually, you've got to celebrate the small wins along the way. Otherwise, it's just hard work, and we've become a lot better at that. And actually, funnily enough, you enjoy it a lot more as well. Being angry at all times, not actually that fun, is it? And I think the other thing conceptually, this is going to sound, I don't want it to sound stark, but I think Larry the painter paints a lot of northern industrial working class life, and I've got one at home, and I really like the idea, the rhythm of life.
Yes.
It feels like a simpler life, but that rhythm of the office and people coming in and clocking in and knowing what to do, and they're focused, and then go out for lunch together. There's a sort of rhythm and pattern that's actually quite comforting to that. And I think that you as you start to run a bigger business, in some ways you are an industrialist, right? You're running effectively a factory. And the best run factories are the ones which have no negative incidents. There are no accidents because it's really well run. People know what the safety mechanisms within that are. People know what they need to do. They're well looked after. There's good esprit de corps. And I think that the mindset of, as we get bigger, is how do you put systems and processes into that so everyone knows they're goal aligned and values aligned, and people come in and I know what I need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And as obviously you get bigger, kind of shepherding everyone into that is part of the challenge. But it comes from top down and bottom up in terms of consistently kind of building the foundations for that to happen.
Yeah. No, moving on to thinking about investors. I mean, every entrepreneur I think of my age is always talking about the ability to exit, and very few do. You've just achieved a second round of private equity funding. What are the things you would advise to young, entrepreneurs in the recruitment sector about how to build their business if they are looking for investors? Or another way to put it is, what do investors look for in a recruitment firm?
My experience is obviously there are 36 to 37,000 recruitment firms in the UK. Right, 82% of them are sub 10 people, and I think in all honesty, the thing that we kid ourselves with as owners of these businesses is like, I'll achieve a 7-8 figure exit one day, and to do that, I think you've got to try to take a step back and say, look, honestly, why did I set up the business, and what do I want it to be? I think founders, owners of these businesses get tied up into, they are very cash generative when they go well. Your ego in terms of it's being fed because you're usually one of the biggest salespeople on the floor in the early days. That becomes quite powerful. I've got to be top biller or producer because those are my medals, right? So the kind of football analogy of show me your medals if you're a manager. How good were you actually before you train me? And a lot of the best managers, not there are lots of exceptions, but lots of the best managers weren't the best players. But changing all that and saying, look, how do I become backable, not as a biller, but as a business leader? So I think what are investors looking for? Probably 3 or 4 things are similar, but one is a great management team. So is the management team backable in terms of institutionally backable? And they're going to give you a lot of their money, right? And that money is fundamentally pension money, largely. So if you think about their responsibility, and therefore your responsibility to them, if you take the money, my view is you've got to take that money quite seriously. And I don't think we do, particularly in our sector, right? We set up business because we don't like being accountable, and then if you do a deal, you suddenly are accountable again. And I think that's we talk about slightly tongue in cheek, but our responsibility to the shareholders, but we do have a responsibility to the shareholders. And so that governance and accountability that changes, particularly second time round. People have asked me how's it different this time round. Check size is 4 to 5 times bigger than first time round. The stakes have gone up. The expectations have gone up. It's a different business now, but I think that is the management team strong enough, and it's not just the CEO. So I think you need a really first-rate CFO, which thankfully we've got. And then probably around that, we've got really strong, wider senior leadership team. So I think that's the first bit. Secondly, again, apart from hitting an EBITDA target and the financials of the business being well run, I think the second bit is what's the uniqueness of the business like. Again, if we've got 36,000 of our companies in the sector, there's going to be a lot of me too's in that, so or copycats. So what are we buying that's different? And if it's not different, why are we putting money into it? We could go and buy a Michael Page or Robert Walters if it's listed investor. If it's PE, what's going to help drive our value creation over the next 5 years to push it on. And then I think thirdly, I think culture is actually really important and probably undervalued, but we talk about culture, and I said this openly. I think we talk about culture. I think culture played out in our DD in terms of our NPS score, in terms of our attrition rates, in terms of client satisfaction, but all of that, I said our culture is probably worth about 10 million quid.
Yes.
People talk about, well, why do we talk about it all the time? I said, I think that's the value that was placed on it because of the outflows of it in terms of what came of it. So, we had our what we call our quarterly offsite yesterday, where we get everyone together to talk about what's going on, and we had the investor come in and talk about, I guess, why do they invest in us, what are their expectations out of us, and a case study, and culture came up. That's a driver as we see it. It's a soft driver that isn't formally part of the value creation plan, but it does merit a whole slide on itself.
Nice. And that personal journey, I mean, one of the fears that I have about potentially even thinking about that, if I'm ever lucky enough to get to that stage, is something around control and giving away control from me. Because I'm quite hands-on.
It gives you the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, it's like someone's going to tell me how to do here, and this is my baby. What was that experience like for you? Is it like that? How did you manage it? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, look, in some ways you've got a boss again, right? So, I think it's one of the most important questions you've got to ask yourself. That accountability, and I think we probably know lots of examples of people who've taken private equity money and within a year they're out, right? It's like, look, I can't handle it, I don't like it. You fall out with the investors. They didn't know what they were buying necessarily or who they were investing in. The entrepreneur didn't realise that it was all going to change. Honestly, do your DD and don't be naive. I think the starting point is if you're taking someone's money, you've got to expect some accountability. It's always like you take a mortgage to buy a property, right? You've got to deliver on paying that mortgage on a monthly basis. Otherwise, they're going to repossess your house. And I think that financially taking investments not dissimilar, right? They're going to have within the legal docs a system of checks and balances that will control or govern your behaviour a little bit. You're going to not have the freedom to do all the stuff that you may have done in the past. And what are those things that when you're owner manager, what are the stuff that you could do? In a smallish business, you basically can do what you want when you want within the realms of it's law. You can spend the money as you wish, right? You want to take all your stuff to Ibiza for a weekend, you can do it, right? You decide you want to buy a company car tomorrow to drive home, you can do it. You've got all the freedoms that you want. You want to take 45 days holiday a year and give everyone 20 days holiday a year. You might annoy everyone, but you can do it, right? Yeah. So all that freedom starts to change. Yeah. But the plus points for me, we've taken the business to within 6 years to being investable. As I saw it, for me personally, it's like, look, I was 30 when we set up the second, 31 we set up the second business. One of the reasons for doing it was I want to find out how good am I at this. And that was quite a big personal driver. Like, I want to find out my test of how good am I as a business person. I know I can run a smallish business. I've done that twice now. Can I push it on? And around the tables, the conversations start to change around, think bigger. So that really, changed my mentality. And I said this yesterday. When we started the business, we said we'd like to get to a £20 million business. I said I think it might take 10 years. And the Up Group had just done their first deal, and it had taken her about 10 years. I thought, okay, that's a good number. We did it in 6. And then the business plan at that point was, we've got to execute the business plan. It was kind of do more of the same but faster. We said, okay, we'll get to 100 million. And I remember thinking, that is so big. So I said, we'll do that in 10 years. Right, we've got 10 years to do it. We did it in 4. And the accelerant has not been, one individual's brilliance. It's really not. It's been, the catalyst has been the group suddenly having, more experienced people inputting into the business and helping us think bigger and therefore act accordingly. Obviously as the business gets bigger, you generate more cash, which is the lifeblood of these, or any business. But that bit around the conversations around the board table and all the other conversations, once you get institutionally backed, your access to different conversations starts to change. That external validation of actually you're a really good business starts to change. The caliber of conversation that I could have, or the level of conversation that I could have with people starts to change as well. If I look back at the stuff that we were doing in 2012 to 2016 to the stuff we're doing today, it's very, very different. Talking about making acquisitions, internationalizing the business, interim's not being a big part of the business, but driving that into the business. All these things become, I guess what would have looked like the impossible becomes, look, we will do it. And we just need to execute it really, really well. And that brings, I guess, a much more singular focus on doing the right things faster. The change is, I'm accountable on a monthly basis, right? How are you getting on with these things? And if you don't like being, I'm not managed, I wouldn't say I'm managed, but if you don't like being accountable, then don't take the money.
Yeah, okay, well noted. And I guess on the other end of that, I've spoken to a lot of high-performing recruiters or just people in professional services recently who have come to me to sort of ask the question, I'm a top performer in my firm, why don't I just go out and do this on my own? Because, as you say, it's low barrier to entry. Your laptop and a phone. I've got the clients. Might have to serve my non-compete. What are the downsides to doing that versus continuing to be a high performer in a larger firm?
Yeah, I can speak for. I used to have a better hairline 10 years ago. Look. I mean, clearly, look, you're two people that have done it, right? So, we clearly see the upsides. I think the downsides are that if you're what are your personal objectives? If your personal objective is autonomy, freedom, making some money, then there are not loads of downsides unless it doesn't work out. In which case, if it doesn't work out, can you go back to employment? And a lot of that will be, well, how long did you give it? And what are you willing to accept? In terms of going back to an employer and their view on risk and the market, right? So if you were having this conversation 2 years ago and people had let's say failed or had not worked out and wanted to be employed, go back to a consulting firm, we'd have probably got them a job, last year or the year before. Yeah. This year, I think it's tougher. It's lonely. Let's be honest, it's a really lonely journey.
Why is that?
I mean, you've got no one really to share with, have you? Who hears, who hears all like warts and all everything. I've got some people I'm really close to in the business and have been. We've been on the bus together for 11 years. You still can't share everything with them. Your greatest fears, you're like, I'm really worried this isn't going to work out in the early years. Or I'm really worried about losing this person, or that key account's just complained about something. You can't really share that openly. So you take a lot of your angst home. I had a lot of sleepless nights in the first probably 6-7 years. And my wife heard all the stories. She knew the ins and outs of everything, and it dominates so much of the conversation, right? And the sleepless nights, I'm assuming you still won't have them, but it's they thankfully become less frequent. But you live and breathe it to an extent, and it's really important. I think that it doesn't become. It's obviously an extension of you, the business, to an extent, but it can't become you. And that again is the hard thing. You cannot leave work in the office. Right? You take it with you everywhere, 24/7. That's the hard bit.
Yeah, and it's emotionally exhausting. I know. And despite all that, you've done it. I mean, what have been your drivers? Why have you taken this path rather than any other?
Look, I think we have. For me personally, I want to find out how good I am. So growth was part of that, personal growth, business growth. For the group of people we employ, I think growth is the single biggest career accelerant we have. So it's like, why would you stay with us versus setting up? Because you'll grow faster. And I don't think it's about money. Money plays a part to it. But you go back to, I guess, some of the stuff going on in the world at the moment. You give people a cause and they'll die for that cause, right? And they'll do it for free. And we're not expecting people to do either of those things, thankfully. But I think that our job's quite missional, right? I think that there are 3 big decisions that people have to make in life. We talk about openly, right? So one is what or who will you worship, and everyone worships something or someone. Number 2, assuming you want to get married or settle down, who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And number 3, what job are you going to do? And that third bit, you get asked at a very early age, and starts to, in the Western world, define us for better or for worse. And it can, you spend so much time doing work and being at work that it can shape your happiness, right? Shape your family life, etc. And so, within our business, knowing that, and obviously we deal with that day in, day out, but knowing that, how do you create an environment which allows people to have success quickly, sustainably, but also in the right way? So my view is trying to get people close enough to the red 5 days a week. So you go to the weekend and you're tired and you need your weekend, but you've earned that. Yeah. We've got loads of case studies in the business of people that I think we're really proud of, to say, look how far they've gone so quickly. And for me, I guess typical in our industry, like people buying a watch or a car. I'm not really into that stuff, but people being able to buy a flat, is a real marker of you've done well, and actually you've got potentially some stability, outside of work. And so that growth agenda, is for me the single biggest career accelerant. It's also the single biggest reason people will stay with the business or join the business. And that again just increases talent density within the business, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. I saw recently you've found a new CEO at Dartmouth, and obviously your role has evolved. Yeah. How good are you at letting go of, just generally, but also in that situation?
She'll tell you I'm excellent. Look, it's very early days, right? So she's been formally in the job since the beginning of September. Okay. So we're 1 month in. We've worked together for 14 years. She has been at Dartmouth for 11 years. She was with us on day 1, so we know each other well. We've worked together for a long time. I guess the dynamics changed, right? I guess starting the business, I was always, effectively the CEO and the boss, and she was, not straight out of university, but relatively junior. And we've grown up together, and we've grown up within the business together. And look, a lot of stuff that just residually sits, not notionally with me, it sits in my mind. We'll need to sort of devolve and hand over. And I think she rightfully says, look, I also need to find my own voice as a CEO. It's not going to be, Logan Mark II. She'll have her own style. She's incredibly smart. That comes across. You'd hope she's got better EQ than me, because it could be worse than mine. So, so I think she'll step into the role, and it will evolve and change. And I think it will take about a year actually till you really find your feet. But she's already, done a few town halls, and I think that, I guess the skill there is, we talk about this a bit, is allowing her to be her own person whilst, and she asked this week, not losing some of the good bits. How do I utilise you to make sure we're not losing some of the good bits? And I'm quite keen to give her some space, allow her to grow in the role without dropping any balls along the way. Look, one of the rationales for it, I think 11 years hearing the same voice within a business is quite a long time. So I think it's a good time to transition. We've obviously got, 2 other brands come Q1, and they need more of me. So I was kind of doing probably 2 roles, particularly in the last 12 months, where priority was getting investment again. Probably not particularly well. So it allows me to concentrate on group. And so how will I be at stepping away from the Dartmouth job? I think the timing's right, and again, trying to be as unemotional about it as possible. Dartmouth, is my 4th child in lots of ways, but I've now got, I've got parental responsibilities for the group now, and that's completely necessary, and it's kind of what I want to do as well. So, I think I actually haven't thought about it too much in terms of, how do I feel about it? It's more like, look, it's just what needs doing. Yes. So there's a pragmatic element to it as well. And actually, I'll be honest, I'm really looking forward to it, because it's not nice feeling like you're juggling stuff, and it's not, you're probably dropping too many balls along the way.
Yeah. It's been a really tough year for a lot of businesses, at least compared to last year, and it continues to be so. What's your advice to, I guess, small business owners in the current climate, business leaders generally? What are the things that they should be thinking about?
Cash. Yeah, look, it has been hard. It's been a really hard year, and partly the last 2 years have been ridiculously good highs, right? Almost out of nowhere. And it's if it looks and feels too good, it probably is too good. Yeah. And we probably, nearly all of us, suffered from irrational over-exuberance. Yes. In the last 2 years, got carried away with, I've cracked it, it's all going really well. Yeah, we probably all got a little bit sloppy in terms of our own personal standards. I think for most of us who've done at least 1 cycle, maybe 2 cycles, there's an alarm bell going off somewhere at the back of my head going, this is not normal. It's never this good. Yeah. And yet I want to, stay at the party for as long as the music's playing. But the music got turned off really, really quickly, and we got caught out, right? So suddenly music's off, lights come on, and you realise actually this isn't as fun as it looks, right? And actually, there's a few people who look like they should have gone home a little while earlier. And so look, whenever it hit people, whether it was Q1 this year, Q2, might have been Q4 last year, people are feeling a bit punch drunk by it, and initially, you've got that high, and it takes a while for, if we carry on with that analogy, the hangover to kick in. But once it does kick in, it's painful, right? And I think, for a lot of people, that was Q2 this year, having had a sort of slowish Q1. And some people are still having a slowish Q3 or Q4. There's no signs of recovery. Look, I think advice would go like, be resilient. I think you've got to find people to talk to. Yeah. It's such a lonely job. Who do you talk to? The worst thing you can do is bottle it up. But you can't talk to anyone, internally, really. People are looking at you to lead at that point, and they're looking for you to say that it's, particularly if you're the most experienced person in the business, look, this is the playbook. This is what I'm going to do. Communication is really important to the team, but I think let's talk about the smaller business. Founders need to have an external NED, chair, mentor to kind of talk to de-stress as well. Otherwise, I think a lot of people get chewed up by this market. I think people feel like they're taking a kicking every day, and that's quite hard. It really is, isn't it? You
Yeah.
know, so it's not, it's not been a fun year, but I also think it was necessary. I think I was looking at where we were last year, just thinking that it's, everything looked great, but I could feel like, look, it's just too easy. And when you've got people starting to, I think again we get all caught up with, last year what were the big conversations? I was like, well, I want to work from anywhere. And like, we've got a really junior workforce actually, and you haven't cracked it, even though your first 12 months have been really good. You've got a lot to learn, or us, in terms of how we were approaching the quality of our work. Did it drop? Do we really care about every single conversation, every single call, every single email? I don't know for a fact, but I suspect we were cutting corners, right? And this is a really good kind of reboot, go back to basics, and it will make the businesses that survive, everyone stronger and better. But we've all got short memories, right? And the reason things move in cycles is because we'll go back to being more diligent for 2 or 3 years till the next boom. We'll get carried away again, people get caught out. It's a sort of rinse and repeat cycle. And the important thing in these cyclical industries is your base camp goes up each time. But I think a lot of businesses don't learn, and that base camp basically stays the same base camp for their existence.
Yeah. So one final question then. Where does it go from here? And at the end of it, what do you want to be remembered for?
Look, from a business point of view, we've got a 5-year plan that takes us from the Paris Olympics to the LA Olympics, conveniently on another Olympic cycle. The plan is to take this business and base case double it over the next 4 to 5 years. We've got 6 things we want to focus on, and execute those 6 things. Will, in the private equity term, the value creation plan will create, I think, a business that hopefully becomes one of the benchmarks for the industry. People go, that was a really good business, really well executed, and the way they go about their work and the way their people are, and culturally, nice business. If we did it in the right way, and a commercial success, I think that's a good thing for. That's how I'd like the business to be remembered, and I'd like people to say, what a brilliant journey. What a brilliant journey. And I said this yesterday to our team. For looking at the age demographic for the firm, in 5 years' time, for them, a lot of them, it'll be just the beginning. I'll be 50 in 5 years' time, right? So, not a spring chicken, but I still think I'll have tons of energy to keep going. But for some of them, it will be their first 4 or 5 years, and they'll be just getting going, and that again creates a lot of excitement and opportunity for the business. For me in particular, personally, how I'd like to be remembered. Look, I'm a Christian. My faith's really important to me. I share that with anyone who's willing to listen, probably a few that aren't. I'd like to be remembered as a Christian, family person, business person, probably in that order. And the way that I interact with people and treat people, hopefully, is a reflection of my faith. I obviously feel like I've got a higher accountability at the end of the day, and I hope that when my time is up, someone will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Thank you.